The viewing gallery smelled like expensive cologne and nervous sweat. 70 students from a dozen different species pressed against the reinforced glass, their expensive tablets ready to record whatever happened next. This was the final exam for advanced xenobiology, and everyone knew it would be spectacular. Dylan Reed stood at the back of the crowd, trying to stay invisible. His scholarship barely covered tuition, which meant he wore the same faded jacket every day while his classmates showed off clothes that cost more than his entire year's housing. He had earned his spot here through test scores, not family connections, and some students never let him forget it. Professor Nilith entered through the main doors, her 4 arms carrying data tablets and specimen files. The Centaurian scholar had a reputation for dramatic presentations, and today seemed no different. She tapped the podium with one hand while the others distributed assessment sheets. "Today you will observe Subject 47, she announced. "Recovered from the Broken Worlds expedition, this organism represents biotechnology from a dead civilization. Your task is simple: document its behavior and theorize its original purpose." A Vrelian student named Sareth laughed from the front row. "Is it dangerous, Professor? Should we be worried?" Nilith's expression remained neutral. 17 research teams have attempted close study. None survived long enough to file complete reports. The casual statement sent whispers through the crowd. Several students stepped back from the glass. Dylan found himself moving forward instead, curious despite the obvious danger. 2 security officers wheeled in a containment unit the size of a small transport vehicle. The walls were triple-layered titanium with energy barriers visible between each layer. Warning symbols covered every surface in 6 different galactic languages. "Begin observation," Nilith said, and activated the viewing protocols. The inner barriers went transparent. Inside the container, something moved. At first, Dylan thought it was just shadows, tricks of light against the metal walls. Then he realized the shadows were the specimen. It had no fixed form, just darkness that shifted and flowed like liquid night. Occasionally, something crystalline would catch the light, sharp edges appearing and disappearing within the mass. The creature pressed against its containment, and several students gasped where it touched the barriers. The energy fields flickered and distorted. The thing was testing its prison, learning the boundaries. Dylan noticed something others missed. The creature's movements followed a pattern. It would touch one section of the wall, pause, then move to another section at a specific interval. Not random exploration. This was methodical investigation. Subject 47 demonstrates extreme adaptive capabilities, Nilith explained. It responds to environmental threats by evolving appropriate countermeasures. The civilization that created it designed the perfect terror weapon. It feeds on fear, using the emotional energy to fuel rapid biological changes. One of the inner barriers failed. The creature surged forward, filling the gap. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Students screamed and pushed toward the exits. Security teams rushed in with weapons ready. But Dylan stayed at the glass, watching. The creature had broken through to the second containment layer, yet it stopped advancing. Instead, it spread across the available space, forming what looked like dozens of eyes across its surface, all of them focused on the fleeing students. The more they panicked, the larger the creature grew. It was feeding on their terror just as the professor had described. The crystalline parts became longer, sharper, more threatening. The darkness deepened, becoming almost solid. Dylan understood then. The creature wasn't trying to escape. It was responding to the fear around it, growing stronger because that was what it had been designed to do. Those extinct creators had built something that turned terror into power, and right now this room was an all-you-can-eat buffet. He did something stupid. He walked to the glass and placed his palm flat against it. No fear, no panic, just genuine curiosity about what this being actually was beneath the weapon its creators had made it become. The creature stopped growing. Every eye turned toward Dylan. The sharp edges retracted slightly. For a moment, nothing else existed except a human and a living weapon studying each other through reinforced glass. Then the creature moved. It flowed across the space until it pressed against the barrier directly in front of Dylan. Something that might have been a limb or might have been just a concentrated part of its mass mirrored his hand position on the other side of the glass. "Get away from there," Nilith shouted. Security grabbed Dylan's shoulders, trying to pull him back. But the creature didn't attack. It just waited, maintaining that strange hand-to-hand connection through the barrier. When Dylan didn't move, didn't show fear, the creature began to shrink. Not disappearing, but condensing itself into a more stable form. The wild, threatening edges softened. The aggressive posture relaxed. "It's not trying to hurt anyone," Dylan said quietly. "It's reacting to what it senses from us. When we're afraid, it becomes frightening. That's what it was built to do." "Impossible," Sareth sneered. "It's a mindless weapon. You're projecting emotion onto a biological tool." Dylan kept his hand on the glass. "Then why did it stop when I stopped being afraid?" The question hung in the air. Professor Nilith stared at her instruments, then at the creature, then at Dylan. Her scientific mind was clearly racing through possibilities, testing hypotheses against what she was witnessing. "Everyone out," she finally ordered. "Except you, Reed, stay exactly where you are." The gallery emptied in seconds. Only Dylan, Nilith, and two very nervous security officers remained. The creature maintained its position, that not-quite hand pressed against the glass across from Dylan's palm. "What's your assessment?" Nilith asked. Dylan chose his words carefully. "I think it's been alone for a very long time. Every living thing it ever met either ran away or attacked it. It became what they expected because that's all it knew how to be. And now someone finally looked at it and saw something other than a monster." The creature pulsed with soft light, as if responding to his words. Professor Nilith made a decision that would change everything. "I'm authorizing extended observation. You'll work with Subject 47 under controlled conditions. If you're wrong about this, Reed, it will kill you." Dylan nodded slowly. "And if I'm right? Then we'll have to completely rewrite our understanding of what this creature actually is." He looked at the being on the other side of the glass, at the weapon that had chosen to stop, to wait, to trust one human out of an entire gallery of students. "I think it already knows what it is. It's been waiting for someone to see it too." 3 days passed since Dylan had first touched the glass. He spent every free hour in the observation chamber, just sitting and talking to the creature behind. The barrier. At first, other students came to watch the weird human talking to a bioweapon like it was a pet. Then they got bored and left him alone. Dylan preferred it that way. The creature seemed calmer when the crowds disappeared. It had stopped trying to break containment entirely. Instead, it would form a shape roughly the size of a large dog and settle near whichever wall Dylan sat closest to. "You're making people nervous," Patricia said. She was a junior researcher, one of the few humans working at the academy. She brought Dylan coffee during his longer sessions, claiming she was studying his interaction methods. Really, she just seemed lonely too. "The creature or me?" Dylan asked. "Both." She handed him the cup and sat down. "The faculty is divided. Half think you've made a breakthrough, the other half think you're going to get eaten and make the academy look bad." The creature shifted inside its containment. Dylan had started noticing its moods. Right now it seemed curious, watching Patricia with what might have been interest. "What do you think?" he asked. Patricia stared at the creature for a long moment. "I think something designed to be a weapon doesn't automatically want to be one, but I also think you're taking a huge risk." She was right, of course. Dylan knew the creature could probably kill him in seconds if it wanted to. But every instinct he had said it didn't want to. It wanted what every living thing wanted, to be understood, to matter, to not be alone. Professor Nilith arrived with her usual entourage of assistants. She had been documenting every interaction, building what she called a behavioral database. Dylan suspected she was actually trying to figure out if he had some special human trait that made this work. "We need to progress to the next phase," Nilith announced. "Observation through barriers has given us valuable data, but we need to understand if direct interaction is possible." You want me to go inside with it? Dylan said, not a question. Absolutely not, Patricia blurted. That's insane. We don't know if it's actually safe or just biding its time. Nilith's 4 arms gestured dismissively. Which is exactly why we must test the hypothesis. Reed, you'll enter a secondary chamber adjacent to the main containment. There will be a barrier between you and Subject 47, but it will be less substantial. Proximity testing. Dylan looked at the creature. It had pressed closer to the glass, like it was trying to hear the conversation. What if something goes wrong? Emergency extraction. We can have you pulled from the chamber in under 3 seconds. Nilith tapped her tablet. Your vital signs will be monitored constantly. Any sign of distress and we abort. Any sign of fear, you mean? Dylan corrected. Because that's what makes it dangerous, right? Fear. The professor paused. Yes, precisely, which is why this is so risky, Reed. If you enter that chamber and feel even a moment of terror, the creature will respond. Its nature is to amplify and feed on that emotion. Dylan stood up and walked to the glass. The creature mirrored his movement, flowing to meet him. When do we start? 2 hours later, Dylan stood in a white-walled chamber barely 3 meters square. One wall was transparent, showing the creature's containment area on the other side. The barrier between them was still there, but thinner. Energy hummed through it, a sound Dylan could feel in his teeth. Nilith's voice came through speakers. We're lowering the opacity of the barrier. Subject 47 will be able to see you clearly. Remain calm. The wall between them shifted, becoming clear as regular glass. The creature, which had been formless and waiting, suddenly moved. It surged toward the barrier with enough force that Dylan heard the energy field strain. Vital signs spiking, someone said over the comm. I'm okay, Dylan said quickly. His heart was pounding, but not from fear, from excitement. It's excited too. It knows something's different. The creature pressed against the barrier. This close, Dylan could see it was incredibly beautiful. The darkness wasn't empty. It was full of depth, like looking into space itself. The crystalline parts caught light and broke it into colors that didn't have names. Dylan sat down cross-legged on the floor. Hey, he said softly, remember me. The creature shifted, lowering itself to match his position. Those dozens of eyes formed across its surface, all focused on him with unsettling intensity. I've been thinking about you, Dylan continued. About what it must have been like being made to scare people, never having anyone stick around long enough to see what else you might be. A ripple passed through the creature's form, not aggressive, something else. Dylan kept talking, telling it about his own life, about growing up poor on a colony. World where everyone knew everyone's business. About being the kid who was too smart for his own good, who asked too many questions, who never quite fit in anywhere. I came to the academy thinking I'd finally find my place, he said. But I'm still the outsider here, still the one who doesn't belong. The creature moved closer to the barrier. A tendril of shadow extended, stopping just short of touching the energy field. Dylan watched it, then slowly raised his own hand. They stayed like that, almost but not quite touching, separated by technology designed to keep monsters contained. You understand, don't you? Dylan whispered. Being alone even when you're surrounded by others. The creature pulsed with soft light, once then twice, like a heartbeat. Reed, we're detecting unusual readings, Nilith said. The creature is attempting to communicate. I know, Dylan smiled. It's saying yes. Over the next week, Dylan developed a simple system. 1 pulse for yes, 2 for no, 3 for uncertainty. The creature learned it in less than a day. Soon they were having basic conversations, with Dylan asking questions and the creature responding with light patterns. Other students tried to replicate his success. Sarath went into the secondary chamber with recording equipment and a smug expression, determined to prove anyone could do what Dylan did. The creature ignored him completely, remaining formless and unresponsive. A Delrian student named Wish tried next, approaching with scientific curiosity and careful notes. The creature watched but didn't engage. No light pulses, no communication attempts. It only responds to you, Patricia observed after the fifth failed attempt by other students. Why? Dylan didn't have an answer. He wasn't special. His grades were average. His background was ordinary. He possessed no unique abilities or traits that made him different from any other human. But every time he entered that chamber, the creature came alive. It would form stable shapes, communicate eagerly, and sometimes just settle near the barrier like it was content to share space with him. Then the Weapons Commission arrived. 3 ships appeared in orbit without warning, carrying officials who claimed legal authority over Subject 47. They had documents, precedents, and a military escort that made the Academy security look like children playing soldier. Dylan was in the middle of a session when alarms sounded. The creature immediately became agitated, sensing something wrong. Nilith's voice came through the speakers, tight with stress. "Reed, exit the chamber immediately. We have a situation." "What's happening?" "They're taking Subject 47. You have 1 hour to say goodbye." The creature's form destabilized, shadows and crystals swirling in distress. It had understood every word. Dylan pressed both hands against the barrier. "I won't let them," he said. "I promise." The creature pulsed frantically. 3 lights, 3 lights, 3 lights. Uncertainty, fear, desperation. "I know," Dylan whispered. "I'm scared too, but we'll figure this out." Outside the chamber, armed soldiers were already setting up equipment. Inside, a weapon designed to terrify had learned to trust. And the human it trusted was about to learn exactly how far he would go to keep a promise. Commissioner Drex was a Corvan, which meant he had gray skin, no hair, and eyes that looked like they had never seen anything worth smiling about. He stood in Professor Nilith's office reviewing documents on a tablet while 2 soldiers waited outside the door. Dylan had been summoned from his dorm at midnight. He still wore his sleeping clothes under a hastily thrown-on jacket. Nilith stood behind her desk, all 4 arms crossed in a posture that suggested she was barely containing her anger. "The creature is classified military salvage," Drex said without looking up. "The Broken Worlds expedition operated under Weapons Commission jurisdiction. Subject 47 falls under our authority." "That expedition ended 6 years ago," Nilith countered. "Your commission showed no interest in the specimen until now. The Academy has legal possession through abandonment protocols." Drex finally looked at her. "We were unaware the specimen had achieved active status. Previous reports indicated it was dormant and possibly deceased. Your recent findings change the situation." "So you want to take it now that it's useful," Dylan said. Both of them turned to stare at him. Nilith made a subtle gesture that clearly meant shut up and let me handle this. Dylan ignored it. "You left it in storage for 6 years, he continued. "Treated it like broken equipment. Now that someone's proven it can communicate, suddenly you care." Drex's expression didn't change. "Your emotional attachment is noted, Student Reed. However, your personal feelings have no bearing on legal ownership. Subject 47 was created as a weapon. It remains a weapon regardless of your interactions." "It's alive," Dylan said. "It thinks, it feels. That makes it a person, not property." An interesting philosophical position, irrelevant but interesting. Drex tapped his tablet. "We depart in 6 hours. You may say your goodbyes to the specimen. Professor Nilith will receive compensation for her research time." Dylan looked at the professor. She met his eyes and gave a tiny shake of her head. Fighting this openly would accomplish nothing. The Weapons Commission had authority, soldiers, and centuries of legal precedent. The Academy was a school, not a government. "Can I go with it?" Dylan asked. Drex actually seemed surprised. "Why would you want to?" "Because it trusts me. You said it yourself, my interactions made it active. If you take it away from me, it'll probably go dormant again, then you've got nothing." The commissioner considered this. Dylan could see calculations happening behind those cold eyes. A cooperative specimen was worth more than a dormant one. Dylan was a resource, a tool to be used. 2 weeks, Drex finally said. You'll accompany Subject 47 to our research facility, assist with initial behavioral assessments. After that, you return to the academy." It was a lie. Dylan knew it immediately. Once they had him on their ship, in their facility, there would be reasons to keep him longer. 2 weeks would become 2 months, then indefinite retention because the specimen only cooperated with him there. But it bought time to figure out what to do, how to help the creature. Dylan nodded. Deal. After Drex left, Nilith grabbed Dylan's arm with one hand while the other 3 gestured frantically. "Are you insane? They'll never let you leave once you're in their facility." "I know." "Then why agree?" Dylan pulled free gently. "Because someone has to look out for it. That creature spent who knows how long alone and afraid, probably centuries. I'm not abandoning it now just because things got complicated." Nilith stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed, a sound that came from all 4 of her lungs. "Humans, you're all ridiculous." "Thank you, Professor." That wasn't a compliment, but she opened a drawer and pulled out a data chip. "This contains all my research, behavioral analysis, communication protocols, everything, if you're going to do something stupid, at least be informed about it." Dylan took the chip. "You could get in trouble for this." "I'm a tenured professor at the most prestigious academy in the galaxy. What are they going to do, fire me?" She smiled grimly. "Besides, if Subject 47 truly is sapient, then what the Weapons Commission is doing is abduction. Someone should have evidence of that." The next 6 hours passed in a blur. Dylan packed his few belongings, said goodbye to the handful of students who bothered acknowledging his existence, and spent his last free time in the observation chamber. The creature knew something was wrong. It had been agitated since the soldiers arrived, its form unstable and constantly shifting. When Dylan entered the chamber, it immediately pressed against the barrier. "We're going on a trip," Dylan said, sitting down in his usual spot. "Together, they're taking us to a research facility." 3 pulses, uncertainty. "Yeah, I don't like it either." Dylan leaned back against the wall. "But I promise I won't leave you alone. Whatever happens, we stick together." The creature's form stabilized slightly. Then it did something new. The shadows and crystals arranged themselves into a shape Dylan recognized. A rough approximation of a human figure, sitting cross-legged, palm pressed to the barrier. It was copying him, showing him that it understood, that it remembered every moment they had shared. Dylan felt his throat tighten. "I'm going to call you Shade," he said. "If that's okay, you need a name that's yours, not just a number." 1 pulse, yes. "Shade it is then." Dylan matched its position hand to hand through the barrier. "We're in this together now, partners." The creature Shade pulsed with warm light. Then it began to change again, but not into something threatening. It became smaller, more compact, until it resembled a large cat made of starlight and shadow. It settled into that form and stayed there, peaceful. Patricia found Dylan an hour later, still sitting with Shade. "The transport is ready. They want you to help load the containment unit." "All ready." "Drex doesn't waste time." She handed him a bag. "Supplies for the trip, food, water, some books. I figured you'd need something to do during transit." Dylan took the bag and stood. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet." Patricia glanced at the soldiers visible through the chamber door. "Just promise you'll be careful. The Weapons Commission isn't known for treating people gently, let alone specimens." "I promise." She left and Dylan turned back to Shade. "Ready." The creature stood, maintaining its cat-like form. 1 pulse. "Me neither," Dylan admitted, "but we'll figure it out." The loading process was efficient and cold. Soldiers sealed Shade into a transport container with multiple redundant containment fields. Dylan insisted on riding in the same cargo bay, refusing to be separated. Drex allowed it with obvious annoyance. As the ship lifted off from the academy, Dylan watched through a porthole as the campus grew smaller. He had no idea if he would ever see it again. Everything he knew, everyone he had met, all falling away into the distance. But when he looked at Shade's container and saw the creature pressed against the transparent wall, watching him back, Dylan knew he had made the right choice. Some things mattered more than safety, more than his education or his future. Sometimes you had to stand with someone who had no one else, even if it cost you everything. The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, and the academy disappeared entirely. Ahead lay the weapons commission facility, hidden somewhere in deep space where no one would witness what happened there. Dylan settled against the cargo bay wall, one hand resting on Shade's container. "Together," he said softly. Inside the container, light pulsed once in agreement. The research facility had no name, just a designation, Site 7. It existed in the space between stars, a massive station that showed up on no public records. The ship docked in a bay that had seen more weapons than Dylan wanted to think about. They separated him from Shade immediately. Dylan argued, pleaded, then shouted, but the soldiers just grabbed his arms and hauled him to a small quarters room. The door locked behind him with a sound of finality. The room had a bed, a desk, and a bathroom. No windows, no way to know if it was day or night, though in deep space that hardly mattered. A screen on the wall showed facility information and rules. Dylan ignored it and pounded on the door until his hands hurt. No one came. Hours passed. Dylan tried to feel Shade through the strange connection they had developed, but distance or shielding or something else blocked it. He felt alone in a way he had not since those first days at the academy. Finally, the door opened. A woman entered, wearing a researcher's coat. She was human, probably in her 30s, with tired eyes and hair pulled back in a practical bun. "I'm Dr. Lisa Grant," she said. "I'll be supervising your cooperation with our study of Subject 47. "Where is Shade?" "The specimen is in Research Lab 3. You're not permitted to see it yet." Dylan stood up. "That wasn't the deal. Drex said I could help with behavioral assessments. I can't do that if you lock me in here." Lisa checked her tablet, not meeting his eyes. "Commissioner Drex wants baseline readings first. We need to understand Subject 47's responses without your influence present." "It'll just go dormant, or worse, it'll think I abandoned it." "That's valuable data too." Dylan stared at her. "You're not really a scientist, are you? A real scientist would want optimal conditions for observation. Having Shade trust me and cooperate would give you better information than stressing it out." For the first time, Lisa looked at him directly. Something flickered in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or shame. "I am a scientist, but this facility doesn't always prioritize pure research." "What does it prioritize?" "Results, specifically results that justify the Weapons Commission's authority and funding." She glanced at the door, then back at him. "Look, I can't tell you much, but you should know that you're not getting out of here in 2 weeks." "I know." That surprised her. "You knew it was a trap and came anyway." "For Shade, yes." Lisa was quiet for a moment. The specimen chose well for what that's worth. She left before Dylan could respond. The door locked again. He spent the next several hours pacing the small room, trying to think of a plan and coming up empty. Finally, exhaustion won and he collapsed onto the bed. He dreamed of shadows and starlight, of crystalline edges and soft pulses of light spelling out messages he couldn't quite understand. Days blurred together. They brought him food through a slot in the door. The screen showed entertainment programs, educational content, anything except information about the facility or Shade. Dylan counted meals to track time. 3 days passed, then 5, then a week. On the 8th day, Lisa returned. She looked even more tired than before, with dark circles under her eyes. "Come with me," she said. "You're cleared to see Subject 47. Dylan followed her through corridors that all looked the same. White walls, bright lights, no windows. Scientists and soldiers passed them without interest. Just another specimen handler taking another asset to containment. Lab 3 was larger than Dylan expected. Banks of instruments lined the walls, all focused on a containment cell in the center, and inside that cell was Shade. except it barely looked like Shade anymore. The creature had lost its stable form entirely. It was just shadows and crystals swirling in distress, occasionally slamming against the walls hard enough to make the entire cell shake. "What did you do?" Dylan breathed. "Stress testing," Lisa said flatly. "Simulated threats, isolation protocols, induced fear responses, standard procedures for understanding weaponized organisms." Dylan felt sick. "You tortured it." "We studied it," but she wouldn't look at him. He walked to the cell. The moment his footsteps echoed on the floor, Shade stopped moving, every crystal oriented toward him. The shadows pulled together into something almost like the cat shape it had favored. "Hey," Dylan said softly. "I'm here. I'm sorry they kept me away." Shade pressed against the containment barrier. 3 pulses, 3 pulses, 3 pulses, rapid, desperate. Then one long pulse that seemed to take all its remaining energy. Dylan's throat tightened. "I know, I was scared too." "Remarkable," someone said behind him. Drex had entered the lab, flanked by 2 other researchers. "The specimen recognizes you even after extended separation and significant stress exposure." "Of course it recognizes me. It trusts me." "Trust," Drex said the word like it was foreign. "An interesting phenomenon in a bioweapon. Tell me, Reed, do you believe Subject 47 is capable of genuine emotion, or is it simply mimicking behaviors that achieve desired results?" Dylan kept his eyes on Shade. "Does it matter? If something acts like it feels, responds like it cares, learns and changes and grows, what's the difference between that and being real?" "Philosophy," Drex tapped his tablet. "We deal in measurable phenomena. Subject 47 demonstrates advanced behavioral adaptation. Your presence triggers a pacification response. We need to understand if this response can be overridden." "Why?" Dylan turned to face him. "What are you actually trying to prove here?" "That bioweapons cannot be rehabilitated. That their fundamental nature remains unchanged regardless of external conditioning." Drex's expression was cold, certain. "If we can demonstrate that Subject 47 reverts to aggressive behavior despite its bond with you, we strengthen legal precedents regarding the classification and control of recovered weapons." Understanding hit Dylan like a physical blow. "This isn't about studying Shade. You want to break it, to prove that things designed to be dangerous can't ever be anything else. We prefer to think of it as confirming objective reality over sentiment." Drex gestured to Lisa. "Proceed with Phase 2 testing. Reed will observe." "No," Lisa said quietly. Everyone in the lab turned to stare at her. She stood straighter, meeting Drex's gaze. "I won't. Phase 2 protocols involve direct trauma induction. Subject 47 is already severely stressed. Further testing could cause permanent psychological damage." "Dr. Grant, need I remind you of your contractual obligations?" "I'm aware of my contract. I'm also aware of basic ethics." Lisa's hands shook, but her voice stayed steady. "Subject 47 exhibits every sign of sapience. Fear responses, memory formation, selective bonding, communication attempts. Continuing these tests isn't research. It's torture of a potentially sapient being." Drex's expression hardened. "You're relieved of duty pending review. Security will escort you to temporary quarters." 2 soldiers moved forward. Lisa didn't resist as they took her arms, but she looked at Dylan. "The creature chose to trust you. That means something." They led her away. Dylan wanted to shout, to fight, to do something. But what? He was one unarmed student in a military facility in the middle of nowhere. Even if he tried to fight, he would just get locked up too, and then Shade would be alone. Drex assigned a new researcher to continue the tests. Dylan was forced to watch as they exposed Shade to increasingly traumatic stimuli. Simulated predators, weapons fire, recordings of screaming. Each time the creature would begin to destabilize, its form becoming more aggressive and chaotic. But then it would see Dylan standing outside the cell, and it would pull itself back together, refusing to become the monster they wanted, fighting its own nature because one human had taught it that there was another way to exist. Hours later, Dylan was returned to his quarters. He sat on the bed, head in his hands, trying to figure out what to do. Shade was getting weaker. He could feel it even through the walls and distance. Each day in this place drained something vital from the creature. The door opened unexpectedly. Dylan looked up, expecting guards. Instead, Lisa slipped inside and quickly shut the door. "We don't have much time," she said. "I'm not supposed to be out of confinement, but I convinced a guard I needed medical attention. Listen carefully. There's a way out of this facility, but you'll need to move fast." "Why are you helping me?" "Because I spent 6 years convincing myself this place did important work. Then I watched them torture something that only wanted to be near one person who was kind to it." Lisa pulled a data chip from her pocket. "This has security codes, facility maps, and evidence of what they've done to Shade. Get it somewhere it matters." Dylan took the chip. "Come with us." "I can't. They'll notice if we both disappear, but you and Subject 47 can make it if you move now." She checked the door. "There's a system malfunction scheduled in 20 minutes. Maintenance override. The lab containment will drop to minimal power. You'll have maybe 5 minutes before security responds." "That's not enough time to get off the station." "There's an emergency shuttle in Bay 6. I've already loaded it with supplies and programmed it with random coordinates. Once you jump, they won't be able to track you easily." Lisa grabbed his shoulders. "Promise me you'll expose what's happening here. That Shade won't be forgotten." "I promise." She nodded and slipped back out of the room. Dylan stood there for a moment, heart pounding, then started preparing. He had 20 minutes to save a life that wasn't even supposed to exist. The facility alarms started exactly on time. Emergency lights flashed in the corridors as Dylan ran toward Lab 3. Scientists and security personnel rushed past him, focused on their own protocols. In the chaos of a system malfunction, one human student barely registered. Lab 3 was empty when he arrived. The containment cells still held Shade, but the multiple redundant barriers were down to just one flickering energy field. The creature sensed him immediately and surged to the front of the cell. Dylan ran to the control panel. Lisa's codes worked on the first try. The final barrier dropped with a hiss of released energy. Shade flowed out of the cell like water finding freedom. For a moment, Dylan wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Creature expanded, filling the lab, shadows and crystals spreading across every surface. It was magnificent and terrifying. Then Shade condensed into the cat-like form Dylan remembered and pressed against his legs, making a sound like wind through crystals. Relief, joy, trust. "We have to go," Dylan said. "Can you follow me?" One pulse, yes. They ran through corridors turned chaotic by the malfunction. Twice they passed security teams, but the soldiers were dealing with containment breaches in other sections. A human and a shadow cat apparently ranked low on the priority list. Bay 6 was exactly where Lisa said it would be. The emergency shuttle sat in its dock, a small craft designed for evacuation rather than comfort. Dylan hit the door release and pushed Shade inside. "Reed," Drex's voice echoed through the bay. The commissioner stood at the entrance with 4 armed soldiers. "Step away from the specimen." Dylan kept one hand on Shade. "No. You're committing theft of military property. The penalty is life imprisonment." "Shade isn't property. It's alive, it thinks, it feels. What you're doing here is wrong." Drex raised his hand and the soldiers lifted their weapons. "Last chance, Reed. Surrender the specimen or be classified as an accomplice to its theft. We are authorized to use lethal force." Shade's form rippled. Dylan felt the creature's rage building, feeding on the threat. This was what it had been made for, what centuries of design demanded it become. A weapon activated by danger, by fear, by the need to destroy threats. "Don't," Dylan whispered. "Please don't become what they think you are." The rippling slowed. Shade pulled closer to Dylan instead of expanding toward the soldiers. It was choosing, consciously fighting its own nature because one human had asked it to. "Remarkable," Drex said. "The specimen's combat programming is completely suppressed. "Reed, how did you accomplish this?" "I didn't do anything. Shade chose this." Dylan backed toward the shuttle. "It could kill all of you right now, easily, but it won't because it's not the monster you want it to be." "Then it's defective." Drex lowered his hand. "Soldiers fire on the specimen. If Reed gets in the way, that's his choice." Everything happened at once. The soldiers fired. Shade expanded instantly, throwing itself between Dylan and the weapons. The energy bolts hit its crystalline structure and scattered. Reflecting back, 2 soldiers went down from their own shots. Dylan grabbed Shade and pulled it into the shuttle. He slammed the door control and jumped into the pilot's seat. The shuttle's engines were already warming, Lisa's preparations paying off. More soldiers poured into the bay. Energy bolts hammered the shuttle's hull. Dylan punched the launch sequence, praying the small craft was tough enough to survive the barrage. The shuttle shot out of the bay and into space. Alarms screamed about hull damage and system failures. Behind them, Site 7's defensive cannons powered up. "Hold on," Dylan told Shade, though he wasn't sure the creature understood what holding on meant. He pushed the engines to maximum and aimed for empty space. The shuttle was fast but fragile. Site 7's cannons could vaporize it in one hit. He needed to jump to faster-than-light speed before they got a clear shot. The jump drive charged with agonizing slowness. 50%, 60%. Behind them, Site 7's cannons locked on. Dylan could see it on the sensors, weapons powerful enough to destroy a small fleet all aimed at their tiny shuttle. 75%. A warning blared, proximity alert. The cannons were firing. Shade flowed forward and pressed against the control panel. Energy surged through the shuttle systems. Dylan felt it, alien power interfacing with human technology, and suddenly the jump drive hit 100% and kept climbing. "What are you doing?" Dylan asked. Shade pulsed once, "Trust me." The cannons fired. Massive energy bolts crossed the distance in microseconds, and the shuttle jumped. Not a normal jump, something faster, more violent. Space twisted around them in ways that made Dylan's eyes hurt to perceive. The shuttle screamed with stress as Shade pushed the jump drive beyond its design limits. They dropped back into normal space light years away from Site 7. The shuttle's systems were fried, smoke rising from half the control panels, but they were alive and free. Dylan slumped in the pilot's seat, shaking. Shade condensed back into its preferred form and settled next to him, exhausted but whole. "You saved us," Dylan said. "You're not just adaptive, you're brilliant." 2 pulses, no. Then Shade shifted, forming itself into a mirror of Dylan's sitting position. 1 pulse, together. Dylan laughed despite everything. "Yeah, together." The shuttle drifted through empty space while Dylan worked to restore basic systems. They had life support and minimal power, but engines and navigation were shot. He managed to get communications online and sent out a distress signal. 3 hours later, a response came. Not from the Weapons Commission, from a neutral trading station called Haven's Rest, offering rescue to any ship in distress. As they waited for the rescue ship, Dylan pulled out the data chip Lisa had given him. He plugged it into the shuttle's damaged computer and started going through the files. Evidence, hundreds of hours of footage showing Shade's torture. Documents detailing the Weapons Commission's real goals. Testimony from other researchers who had raised ethical concerns and been silenced. Communications proving that Site 7's purpose was to justify military control over potentially sapient recovered technology. "This is enough," Dylan said. "Enough to bring them down, to prove you're not a weapon anymore if you ever really were." Shade watched the screen showing its own suffering. Dylan expected anger or fear or trauma. Instead, the creature formed a shape that looked almost like a human hand and touched the screen gently. Where images of its own pain played, Shade showed only sadness. "You forgive them," Dylan realized, "even after everything they did." 3 pulses, uncertainty. Then Shade formed words in crystals of light, spelling them out carefully like Dylan had taught it during their sessions. Not forgive, understand, HFY afraid. That doesn't make it okay. Agree, but Shade pulsed once, indicating the next word carefully, pity. The rescue ship arrived 6 hours later. A civilian vessel crewed by various species who made their living hauling cargo and helping stranded travelers. They asked no questions about the human and his unusual companion, just brought them aboard and offered food and rest. Dylan spent the transit to Haven's Rest writing a detailed account of everything that had happened. The academy, the bond with Shade, the abduction, the torture, the escape. He attached Lisa's evidence files and sent it all to Professor Nilith, to news networks, to the Galactic Council Ethics Committee. By the time they reached Haven's Rest, the story was everywhere. The Weapons Commission tried to suppress it, claiming Dylan was a thief and Shade a dangerous organism. But too many people had seen the evidence, too many independent researchers. Confirmed what Dylan had documented. The Galactic Council called for an emergency tribunal. The question, was Shade sapient, deserving of rights and protection, or was it property, a weapon to be controlled? Dylan and Shade were given temporary sanctuary on Haven's Rest while the tribunal prepared. They stayed in a small apartment overlooking the station's central garden, a rare patch of green in the metal structure. Whatever they decide, Dylan said one evening while watching ships come and go through the viewport, I'm staying with you. Even if they rule you're a weapon, even if the commission comes back, I'm not leaving. Shade had grown more sophisticated in its communication. It formed words regularly now, practice making it easier. No, grateful. Then, after a pause, friend. Yeah, Dylan said softly, friends. Outside, the galaxy debated whether something designed to terrify could learn to love. Inside that small apartment, a weapon and a student who became friends already knew the answer. The tribunal chamber was built to hold representatives from every major species in the Galactic Council. Hundreds of seats rose in tiers around a central platform where Dylan and Shade waited. Cameras captured everything, broadcasting to billions across known space. Dylan wore the nicest clothes Haven's Rest could provide, which meant a simple suit that almost fit. Shade maintained its cat-like form, sitting calmly beside him despite the weight of countless eyes watching. The head jurist, an ancient being called Magistrate Fen, reviewed documents on a transparent display. 3 other jurists flanked him, representing different legal traditions and perspectives. Commissioner Drex sat with the prosecution, along with a team of lawyers who had spent weeks building their case. This tribunal will determine the legal status of the entity designated Subject 47, Fen announced. Is it sapient and therefore entitled to individual rights, or is it classified technology subject to military jurisdiction? The prosecution went first. They presented evidence of Shade's creation as a bioweapon, its history of killing researchers, its design specifications that prioritized terror and destruction. Expert witnesses testified that adaptive behavior did not equal true consciousness, that Shade's responses to Dylan were merely sophisticated programming. Subject 47 mimics sapience, one expert claimed, like a computer, running a social simulation. It appears to think and feel, but these are predetermined responses to environmental stimuli. Then it was Dylan's turn. Professor Nilith stood as his primary witness, presenting her research from the academy. Subject 47 demonstrated clear signs of sapient thought, she testified. It learned symbolic communication in under 3 days. It made choices that went against its programming, specifically choosing nonviolence when violence would have been advantageous. It formed selective bonds based on individual recognition. Many animals form bonds, a prosecution lawyer argued. That alone doesn't prove sapience. True, Nilith agreed, which is why I also documented Subject 47's ability to understand abstract concepts. Time, promise, friendship, forgiveness. These require consciousness, not just programming. The prosecution attacked her methodology, questioned her objectivity, suggested she had been fooled by a sufficiently advanced biological machine. The arguments went in circles for hours. Finally, Magistrate Fenn raised a hand for silence. We have heard extensive testimony about the entity. Perhaps we should hear from it directly. He looked at Dylan. Can Subject 47 communicate its own perspective? Dylan stood. Yes, Magistrate, but Shade needs proper equipment. It communicates through light patterns and crystal formations. We'll need a display system. Technicians set up a holographic projector. Shade flowed onto the platform and interfaced with it, energy passing from the creature into the technology. Words appeared in the air, glowing letters formed from Shade's own light. I am Shade. The chamber erupted in whispers. Even the jurists looked surprised. The prosecution immediately objected. This proves nothing, their lead lawyer said. Pre-programmed responses displayed through technology. I was made to kill, Shade wrote. Made to terrify. For a long time, that is all I knew. Then the words paused before continuing. Then DYLAN saw me different. It's referencing Reed, the prosecutor argued. Clearly manipulated testimony. Magistrate Fenn gestured for silence. Let the entity finish. DYLAN showed me I could choose, Shade wrote. Not just react. Choose, I chose to stop hurting, chose to learn, chose to trust. The words hung in the air, choices make me real. A philosophical argument, the prosecutor said, not legal evidence. Ask me anything, Shade. Wrote, I will answer. Prove I think, prove I feel, prove I am. Magistrate Fenn considered this. Very well, Subject 47, what do you fear most? The answer came immediately, being alone forever, being only a weapon, forgetting DYLAN's kindness. What do you want? To live, to learn, to matter for something besides fear. If granted sapient status, what would you do with freedom? The projection flickered as Shade formed a longer response, help others like me. BINGS made for war who want peace. Show them someone can choose different path, and after a pause, stay with DYLAN. He is my friend. The prosecution tried to continue their objections, but Magistrate Fenn had heard enough. He conferred with the other jurists in low voices while the chamber waited in tense silence. Finally, Fenn spoke. This tribunal finds that Subject 47, self-designated as Shade, demonstrates sufficient evidence of sapient thought, emotional complexity, and autonomous decision-making. It is hereby granted legal personhood status under galactic law. The chamber exploded in noise. Some delegates cheered, others shouted objections. The Weapons Commission representatives looked furious. However, Fenn continued, and the room quieted, this ruling comes with conditions. Shade's origins as a bioweapon cannot be ignored. It will remain under observation for a probationary period. Dylan Reed, as the individual who has established the most stable rapport with Shade, are you willing to serve as guardian during this period? Dylan didn't hesitate. Yes, Magistrate. Then it is so ordered. Shade is granted citizenship with probationary status. The Weapons Commission's claim of ownership is void. Fenn looked directly at Drex. Furthermore, this tribunal orders a full investigation into Site 7 and its treatment of potentially sapient recovered technology. Drex stood abruptly and left the chamber, his legal team scrambling to follow. Dylan felt no satisfaction watching them go, only relief that it was over. After the tribunal, there were interviews and legal documents, and 1,000 administrative details. Dylan handled them all in a daze, barely believing they had won. Professor Nilith found them in the aftermath. The Academy has extended you both an invitation, a full scholarship for you, Dylan, and a research position studying recovered biotechnology ethics, if you want it. Dylan looked at Shade. What do you think? I want to learn, Shade wrote through a portable display. Want to help? Yes. They returned to the Academy 3 weeks later. Students who had ignored or mocked Dylan now wanted to meet him, to see the creature that had changed galactic law. Dylan found it exhausting and strange. Shade adapted to academic life with surprising ease. The creature attended lectures, participated in research, and slowly learned to refine its communication. It developed a sense of humor, once projecting "Is this class over?" yet during a particularly dry legal philosophy seminar. Other beings began arriving at the academy. Creatures recovered from dead worlds, organisms designed as weapons or tools, all potentially sapient and previously classified as property. Shade worked with each one, teaching them that they could choose what to become. A year after the tribunal, Dylan stood in the same observation gallery where he had first seen Shade. But now they stood together on the same side of the glass, watching a new arrival. Something that looked like living metal, shaped for destruction, pressed against the barrier with what might have been curiosity. "Think it'll respond to you?" Dylan asked. "I was never special," Shade wrote on the portable display. "Just lucky to meet you. This one needs own DYLAN." "Maybe," Dylan studied the metal creature, "but you can show it that change is possible. That's worth something." Shade formed into a shape that almost resembled a human smile. Worth everything. Patricia arrived with coffee for Dylan and a specialized nutrient solution they had developed for Shade. She had been released from Weapons Commission custody after the investigation, immediately hired by the Academy to develop ethical protocols for working with recovered biotechnology. "How's our new friend?" she asked, nodding at the metal creature. "Scared," Dylan said, "but curious. That's a good start." They watched together as Shade approached the barrier and began the same process Dylan had started all those months ago. Patient observation. No fear, just genuine interest in what this being could become given the chance. The metal creature stopped thrashing and moved closer to the glass, not attacking, watching. "It's working," Patricia breathed. Shade pulsed with light, then wrote, "Because all things want same to be seen, to matter, to choose." Dylan thought about his scholarship application all those months ago, how desperate he had been to escape his small colony world and find somewhere he belonged. He had come to the academy looking for himself. Instead, he had found Shade, and in teaching a weapon to be something more, he had learned what he was meant to become too. Not just a student, not just a human trying to prove he deserved his place. A friend to beings who had no one else, a voice for creatures classified as property, a bridge between what something was made to be and what it could choose to become. The metal creature pressed against the glass, and Shade mirrored the gesture, beginning again, teaching again, proving again that choice mattered more than design. "You know what I realized?" Dylan said to Patricia. "That first day in the gallery when everyone else ran and I stayed, I wasn't being brave, I was just curious. I wanted to understand." "Sometimes," Patricia said, "curiosity is the bravest thing there is." Shade pulsed in agreement, and somewhere in its light and shadow, Dylan saw the echo of every moment they had shared. Fear transformed into trust, isolation into friendship, a weapon choosing peace. The metal creature's form shifted slightly, becoming less aggressive, more open, taking its first step toward something new. And Dylan smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning. There would be others, more weapons who wanted to choose peace, more beings trapped between what they were made for and what they could become. But they wouldn't be alone. They would have Shade to show them the way. And they would have humans who understood that sometimes the most important